Hey, folks. Well, my apologies for being absent for so very long. But yeah, a lot of life stuff going on there. And actually, it's a bit embarrassing to admit this, but I actually did a recording of in two parts. Had to break it up of my review for Heretics of Dune, the fifth installment in Frank Herbert's classic anthology. And yeah, somehow videos got lost. Problem is, I do a lot of videos, a lot of recordings, Zoom meetings, and well, stuff for podcasts, interviews, etc. And so sometimes, yeah, innocent videos get deleted in the mix. But yes, I was determined to get back to this because this is a series I really wanted to finish. First up, the beer I'm drinking right now is Wolf's IPA by Raised by Wolves, sorry, by Driftwood Brewing. It is, as noted, an IPA, very much a West Coast IPA. Very hoppy. It's got the usual mix of your three C's, Cascade, Columbus, and Centennial, I think. And that's just not based on a reading of the label, just based on the taste itself. Very citrusy, tropical, and yeah, even a hint of passion fruit and pineapple, but strong and herbal in its flavor. So, um, as I'm sure I mentioned it before in the course of this series, Heretics of Dune is one of my personal favorites. Now, a lot of people also said this a bunch of times there in the course of these reviews. That yeah, a lot of people who have read the Dune books, or they've most have read the first, based on just people I've talked to, and many other people have read the first three, but rarely do you meet people who have read all six. So five is kind of like a hidden gem that a lot of people wouldn't have got to because, of course, they didn't really venture beyond book one. They didn't venture beyond the first three books. Book four can be a bit of a gatekeeper for a lot of people, I think, because it's quite dense and very philosophical and kind of plotting and so forth. And that's really too bad because book five, whereas everything up to book four, and especially book four, puts in a lot of threads, a lot of hints, a lot of telltale kind of little indicators that you really don't fully grasp until rereading and further reading. Book five is where a lot of it really starts to come together. And unfortunately, Frank Herbert died before writing the seventh and allegedly final book. And that task was picked up by his son and Kevin J. Anderson, a famous pulp sci-fi and sci-fi fan fiction author, which, yeah, want to get into in a later review. But yeah, to give a quick breakdown of this, and once again, I'm caught between spoiler territory and adequate review territory here. So keep in mind, yeah, uh, there will be spoilers ahead, but I'll try to keep it as general as possible, so that people can hear what I have to say if they feel like it, and then hopefully they'll actually be encouraged to read this book. So yes, Heretics of Dune, the events of that book, they take place roughly 1,500 years after events in the God Emperor of Dune. And so, and those events took place, what was it, 2,500 years after the events in Children of Dune, which was about a generation after the events of Dune itself. So at this point, over 4,000 years have passed since Paul Muad'Dib and led the Fremen on Arrakis in a grand revolt and overthrew not only the Harkonnens but the Imperium and created the dictatorship of Muad'Dib and the religion of Muad'Dib and so forth. Leto the Second, of course, then became the tyrant. And at this point, as Leto predicted and hoped, yes, his rule, people look back on it, he's known on Arrakis as Shaitan. And, well, yeah, the name of Arrakis is no longer Arrakis, it's just Arrakis. A lot of, place names and nomenclature have changed. They've evolved since the dissolution of Leto's empire. And, okay, I notice my hair keeps sticking up. It's the fan. It keeps pushing it up. So I'm just going to ignore that. Or try to. OCD. It's not helpful in situations like these. Any case, so the the book opens onto, yes, a universe now that has changed dramatically since Leto died, and his worm body broke apart and retreated into the sands on Arrakis. And as predicted, as he foretold, Arrakis has now changed back into a desert planet. So the worm body that broke apart there, the sort of sand trout and young worms there, they once again they triggered an ecological change on Arrakis. Not going to get used to that. On Arrakis, that turned it back into a desert planet after Leto II oversaw its ecological transformation. So the worms are now there again, and the spice is once again flowing. But this came after a period known as the famine times, because once Leto was gone, essentially spice distribution ceased. And so, yeah, the famine times were basically when the Imperium, the known universe, was without spice. However, civilization did not collapse because Leto had been weaning humanity off the spice for quite some time, and the great orders, right, the Bene Gesserit and the Guild and others, yeah, they had managed to find their way around dependence upon this single resource as a result of that. And in addition, all of Leto's dictatorial proscriptions, right? He forbade interstellar travel except for official, you know, factional business, right? And basically, yeah, imperial business. And he also made sure that people on the various planets that made up the Imperium, they were not allowed personal flyers or shuttles of any kind. So or yeah, hover cars or whatever they had. So basically, the population was restricted to walking everywhere. And so this sort of stifled nature that he imposed on the Imperium, it then, as he had said in book four, or no, it was book three actually that he originally said that he said that he would impose, a strict tyrant style repressive dictatorship on the universe, and that eliminated the great houses. There were no longer any great houses at this time. Basically, whatever pretenses to nobility and so forth that had been there, the feudal structure of the universe had been dropped, and the state of living standards and so forth, as had been noted by chroniclers and people who had been looking at the state of Leto's Imperium, they noted that, yeah, basically the classes are approaching equilibrium here. There's this, which is an interesting thing to have taken place there after the events in Dune. They established that, of course, the Imperium was very, very much all about dynastic rulers, the emperor, the great houses, the Frau Frey whatever they call them. Yeah, basically, yeah, the Congress of the Great Houses. And so, anyway, so after that, after all Leto's imposition of that, and they'd also mentioned this in book four, the guild manages the Ixians. Sorry, they managed to create a navigation machine that does away with a human navigator who is, of course, relying on the spice for their abilities. So basically, guild ships now they are equipped with their own navigation drives that use whatever fancy technology they've developed to get around prescience and just remove the need for a seer who can see through space and time to navigate a ship. Yeah, and that and their classic Holtzman engines, which is what folds space. And although that is never explained how they do that, but there was some hints given in book six as to how that worked. and did a lovely article about that a while back on the technology in the Dune universe. It's quite fun. So yeah, this stuff is pretty fresh right now. So I did review all that. Anyway, yeah. So that technology plus synthetic spice, which the Tleilaxu came up with. All these were in response to Leto's dictatorship in the famine times. And the other thing that was mentioned in book four was the technology for no chambers, and that's been scaled up to no ships. And the idea behind that is that you have a ship now with that's specially designed. It's got special material around it that absorbs radiation and prevents prescience. So Leto himself, or a guild navigator, or anyone else who developed, the Kwisatz Haderach like abilities, they would not be able to see what's going on inside them. So now the universe is filled with these no ships and no chambers and all forms of the technology that ensures that no prescient can see what people who are inside them, and this now accounts for much of humanity at any given time, what they're doing and what they're up to. So all of this to say that what Leto did was he was basically trying to make humanity immune to people like himself and Paul Moadib. And he said that's exactly what he set out to do, and that's what he's done. And furthermore, his imposition of the no travel, the travel bans, and the walking everywhere and all that stuff, yeah, as he said, that would produce, when he was gone, its opposite. And it has. Using the no ships, the guild navigating machines, synthetic spice, all of that, humanity just burst forth and began expanding into beyond the Milky Way galaxy, into other galaxies and even other universes. Because jump drives apparently have that ability. If you can fold space, move from one point in space time to another, well, then either by improvement or extension, they're able to jump to new universes or to alternate universes, right? And so humanity is now spread beyond the range of any one individual. And the rule of any one person, the prescient ability of any one person, the control of any single faction, and reliance on any single resource. So all of this was part of Leto's the Second's plan, and Paul Moadib, who had foreseen it first. And so, yeah, you now have a um, a system of politics in which you've got factions. Yes, the Bene Gesserit are still there, the Ixians are still there, the Guild is still there, although they have no monopoly at all anymore. Um, I could be wrong about that. Have to double check that, but I believe the Guild is still there. And the Tleilaxu are still there too. And they get a lot of page time in this book because it's revealed exactly who they are and what they've been up to, and it's really quite fascinating and even a little bit creepy. But actually, it's very creepy. Um, Suffice it to say, no spoilers, but a little hint. They reveal the Tleilaxu secret to just about everything they do, cloning Golas, the resurrected people, and the synthetic spice, everything they develop. It's all attributed to their axolotl tanks, and we find out exactly what those are with creepy consequences. Um, and so, into all this, I think I've covered all the changes. Yeah, into all this, there is now what is released near the beginning of the book is the Atreides Manifesto. And it's basically saying that, yeah, we are the Atreides, we are Legion, because Leto the Second bred the Atreides genes into as many bloodlines and people as possible. But the trick of it is that none of these people are Kwisatz Haderachs. Instead, they've been gifted with a certain latent prescience, right? They can sense things, they are attuned, they are able to work out their futures moment by moment, not being trapped by any set future. And at the same time, yeah, they are able. They've got a certain sensory awareness that is very heightened, and yeah, that is released. And so the Bene Gesserit and the those who wrote it, this Atreides manifesto, they're now basically trying to figure out exactly what was the tyrant's plan here. We've seen the effects, but what was his end game? What was the long-term aim? And as part of that, they have, and this is all stuff you'll read in just the first few chapters, so it's pretty safe. But they've started resurrecting the Duncan Idaho Golas again. And yeah, Leto the Second, as we saw in book four, he kept creating Duncan Idaho companions for himself, Golas, which he then bred with his fish speakers, and that's how he bred the Atreides genes into as many lines as possible. They've now resurrected him because they're hoping to figure out what was that all about. Because they figure his breeding program, the way he had, commandeered that from the Bene Gesserit, that was his big main thrust. That is the big unknown where he is going with that. And also, in and around all this, we learn that there is a new faction that is returning from what was called the scattering, right? Humanity going to all these distant places, distant universes. And so there's a faction that's coming back, and they're called the Honored Matras. So they are much like the Bene Gesserit, a sort of a priesthood of all women. They have taken the Bene Gesserit talent, their their sort of tantric sexual prowess, right? Something they're all trained to do, that they have a great skill in, basically seducing men of power and import, and then siring their offspring, and who are then raised as girls always in the Bene Gesserit as a way of carrying on these bloodlines, and they were doing that for thousands of years, right? Trying to capture all the necessary bloodlines and ultimately distilling them to the point where they give birth to a man. Paul Muad'Dib became that man, that contained all the necessary genetic traits to be the Kwisatz Haderach, right? So basically, just yeah, constant mixing in the hopes that that would produce their special being, with the help of Spice, of course, given who had all the Bene Gesserit strengths. And it does, of course, sound sexist and so forth, but the reasoning being that genetically speaking, right, women can carry on all these genetic markers in the X chromosome, but by the time you get to a certain point, it's like, now we want all those to manifest, because not all of them are, because the two X chromosomes, they will cancel each other out. So in the same way that certain genetic diseases are passed on through the women in the family in a matrilineal fashion, only the boys will manifest them. So, what am I thinking of? Hemophilia. That's a good example. And there are many others, right? It's like, yeah, in this case, instead of diseases, though, they're passing on abilities, and of course, the Kwisatz Haderach would manifest them all. He would have perfect memory, perfect predictability, etc. And yeah, so they've done much the same thing. But yeah, the sexual prowess, right? The honor matras, they've taken it to a whole new level. They can reduce any man to a servile individual through imprinting, which means basically having sex with them. And it's like, once an honor matra has done that with you, you are theirs. You are incapable of not doing as they say, because yes. And they're also extremely good fighters and just ruthless. Instead of spice, they use some kind of adrenal stimulant that is talked about, and it gives their eyes an orange irisy look, rather than the blue and blue that Spice did. So they're coming back now, and basically, you have a sort of an interplay of agendas there, whereas the Bene Gesserit are trying to figure out Leto's big plan, and they're looking at that through the Duncan Idaho Golas. the Tleilaxu are looking to now make their move and establish dominance, and their face dancers are a big part of that. And in come the honored matras as well, and they too are looking for dominance. So all this is happening, and it's all playing to, they're all dancing to a tune that Leto the Second basically is still running. So it's like, yeah, everything that we have now puts us beyond the control of any tyrant, any prescient. Leto the Second is still alive in a sense, because all the worms that are there on Arrakis now, they contain a pearl of his wisdom, as he described it, right? So they each got a little bit of his consciousness in them, which, as he explained, that they have more ganglia, a more developed nervous system, so they are in fact aware. They're not just these big dangerous things, and and they can respond to people, people who have the genetic ancestry of the Atreides line, and that produces some very very interesting patterns there too. So yeah, um, I will say this, yeah, kind of a spoiler, but yeah, one girl in particular on Arrakis finds out purely by accident that she can command the worms, and yeah, her name is she is a descendant of Chani and a descendant of Siona, who was also a descendant of Chani, and she was from book 4. She's the one who took Leto the Second down. Yeah, and she's Shiana. And this was not known, but of course, once they realized, yeah, she can command the worm, and the priests start fawning over her, thinking she's a prophet, that is revealed. All I'm going to say about that, but that too is an early book thing that we learned, and yeah, and so of course efforts are on from both the Tleilaxu and Bene Gesserit to try and acquire her, right? Because it is strongly believed, yeah, she has abilities here. She is the key to something of this. So yeah, they do realize, even though we are now such a fruitful and multiplied species, even though we are broken free of all constraints that were imposed by the old Imperium, including the whole Bene Gesserit breeding program, we're still dancing to Leto's tune because he foresaw all of this, and he basically gave us the tools we needed to make the next move. And what that is slowly revealed as the book goes on. And by the end, hmm, well, let's just say the stage is set for, yeah, a major confrontation. I'm not going to say who. No, no, can't say that either. Uh, the stage is set for a major confrontation, um, and um, and yes, and it is the Bene Gesserit do realize that, yeah, this was Leto's plan. It's like things are unfolding in such a way, and we're here with the requisite tools that we need, which includes that whole Atreides latent prescient awareness, the ability to make just judgments, major judgments for which, the universe, all major events that are happening, things will turn on that at any given time, that as many of us as possible are able to do that. And instead of being reliant on one leader in particular, there's many players now contributing to the ultimate goal, and they have that sense of necessity, the well, as Paul called it, terrible purpose or species memory, that allows them to understand what they need to do, what ultimately serves survival, and yeah, the ability to carry on. So yeah, and the book has some very good characters, some very good action, and yeah, ultimately, let's see. Miles Tegg is a major character in there. He's the Bashar for the Bene Gesserit, so their military commander, and he is basically, yeah, he's responsible for a lot of the action and fighting in there, and There's Odrade. She is a sister too. And yes, they are. Both of their ancestry reveals some interesting things. Shiana is another. And who am I forgetting? Oh, yeah. Waif, Waif. He's the Tleilatsu master, one of 12, who is featured very, very prominently in this. And yeah, all of their actions, all of their behaviors in this, yeah, they're all very, very interesting and telling. And um, at the end, yeah, the scrappy group and several other characters who are there with them, yeah, they end up doing some pretty cool things. Anyway, that sets the stage for book six, which sort of ties the knot on some of these many cool threads, but then introduces, another major one. Because it's like, yeah, for the big mysteries that are presented in the book, some of which are revealed, right? Not only, yeah, what was Leto the Second's plan? What was he talking about when he predicted these things and he foretold of these things? How did that turn out? What, our favorite destinations there, in addition to Arrakis, which was changed to Arrakis. You have Caladan, now known as just Dan, and Gadi Prime, the Harkonnen homeworld, is known as Gamu. And this has happened pretty much across the board, right? Place names have changed. They've sort of been simplified or whatever. And that whole idea of linguistic evolution is very cool. And my wife, being a linguist, obviously she got me rather interested in this stuff a long time ago. And I've been looking at that myself for the purpose of science fiction writing, right? Like writing stories that look at how language will evolve, much as it has since the beginning of time, uh, because of further migrations and interstellar migrations, right? Yeah, the possibility of that, or even interplanetary migrations. So, all that and then some is then happening, and the other major mysteries, yeah. It's like, who are the honored matras, right? They have similarities to the Bene Gesserit, but they're not just Bene Gesserit sisters who went out there and are coming back. There's a whole new interesting sort of, combination there that led to their creation. Who are the Tleilaxu, really? Also neat. We get a peek behind the curtain. And also, yeah, why are the honored matras, invading the old Imperium? They're basically leaving their old home, so much like the yeah, the mass migrations of horsemen from the east, whether we're talking about the Mongols, the Huns, and well, the Indo-European migrations, right? The way that spread so many of the languages we now know today as part of all known European languages and yeah, Western part of the Western tradition and also Central Asian languages too, right? Hindi and Farsi, these are all descendants of some of those migrations. It's like, yeah, why did these folks suddenly just start branching out? Were they running towards something, or were they running away from something? Or yeah, or were they just looking for greener pastures because the pastures at home weren't doing so good? All that comes up, and it's quite neat. And I wish I could go into more detail, but yeah, this is why the previous video I did, it had to be broken into two parts because it went like an hour long. Ugh. And even I was just overwhelmed by the amount of details I had to recall. So yeah, I recommend strongly that people check out Heretics of Dune. And to give you a little bit of a preview of what comes after, it's Chapter House Dune. Yeah, that sort of wraps things up for the. It did as far as Frank Herbert could in the whole Dune series. Book six is a lot like book four in that it is pretty philosophical. It is pretty dense and it's slow build up and a lot of talking, a lot of this and that, a lot of exploring. And in fact, they do get into the honored matras culture and the details about who they are rather extensively there, and they provide hints as to why they've come back into the old Imperium seeking conquest and why they're rather obsessed with, in particular, taking down the Bene Gesserit. Not so much eliminating them as just, conquering them and capturing all their secrets and so forth. Why they're so interested in that. Because that was a big thing. Cool. And yeah, and there too, they leave some pretty tantalizing threads untied, and that has been the huge mystery of the Duneverse ever since Frank Herbert died. It's like, what was he building towards? What was his true intention here? Because when I get to it, talking about what the son Herbert and his Kevin J. Anderson, his co-writer there, what they came up with, it struck a lot of people, fans and critics alike, as just no way. Doesn't work, doesn't fit. And also, it's really, really pulpy sci-fi science fiction material here. So, we may never know. But yeah, people who are far more versed in this than I am, and if you're on YouTube, check out Quinn's Ideas. It's a video where this young aficionado, uh, kind of a science fiction guru, he's also a graphic artist and just really freaking smart. He gives a detailed breakdown of each book. And I turned to him and I listened to all of his reviews there because yeah, he manages to really sift through them and pick up a lot of things, a lot of nuance, a lot of fascinating stuff, a lot of details that I was not keen on at the time of reading. I came away with a pretty general understanding, I felt. Um, but of course, that's Frank Herbert's kind of his gift. He's a bit of a Nietzsche. He's inaccessible. His books are written for everyone and no one, right? But whereas Nietzsche was scant on details, and that's kind of what contributed to him being inaccessible. Yeah, Frank Herbert gave a lot of detail. It just wasn't really clear what he was saying all the time. It does require a few readings really to get the nuance. And if you don't have time for that, like most people, yeah, checking in with a truly gifted nerd like Quinn, for example, uh, well, that works too. Anyway, so that's all for now. That's Heretics of Dune down. So I've got just one more to do in the Dune saga, and beyond that, I was still hoping to do some books by don't tell me, Neuromancer, William Gibson. Thank you. By William Gibson, because yeah, whole swaths of his writing there I haven't covered at all. That includes the Bridge trilogy, and I believe I got one more in the Sprawl trilogy. Wouldn't mind tackling the Big End trilogy. Problem is, yeah, it's like how far this whole review process goes. It's really just a matter of yeah. As long as I'm going, I'm gonna end up just keep going. So yeah, I want to cut it off at a certain point here, just because there is not a lot of time for these reviews these days. Um, and oh, if I cannot leave you with one section here, I earmarked the page just so that I could. And one quick correction: WAF is spelled WAFF, not IF. That's okay. Anyway, words that Leto the Second left behind in this story, and without context, they're not going to be a spoiler, so I feel okay. And it's basically writings that he left behind. In what form, where, and to what end, you cannot say. But yeah, they're all written in the Atreides battle language of Chakobsa, so yeah. It said, "Why did your sisterhood not build the Golden Path?" So it's clear he's addressing the Bene Gesserit. This was a message for them. You knew the necessity. Your failure condemned me, the God Emperor, to millennia of personal despair. My words are your past. My questions are simple. With whom do you ally? With the self-idolaters of Tleilaxu? With the fish-speaker bureaucracy? With the cosmos wandering guild? There's Flora. With the Harkonnen blood sacrificers? Suppose they're still around in some sense? With the dogmatic sink of your own creation? How will you meet your end? As no more than a secret society? Oof. And yeah, basically, noble purpose, which was the a term that the Bene Gesserit used, right? They, or rather, Paul used that terrible purpose was what he believed he possessed, and then he later changed that to species memory. Leto the second was the one who said, yeah, all these abilities and so forth, and the whole necessity thing, oh yeah, fine and good, whatever. But unless it's for a noble purpose, it's nothing. It serves no end except personal aggrandizement. So yes, it was a call to action basically towards the Bene Gesserit. And from that, Odrade, who is one of the recipients of this, she interprets it correctly. She understands what it means, and it basically means join me on the golden path now at this critical juncture in history. And that ends up being a very, very fascinating and interesting time there. So, more on that in the next installment there. And thank you for listening, everyone who's actually been with me so far. I just want to say my heart goes out to you. That, Elon, is how you do that right, asshole. Take care.